Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Good evening again. It's nice to see you all. Tonight I want to talk about the Heart Sutra. We've been chanting the Makahanya Haramita Shingyo, which is the Heart Sutra in Sino-Japanese, for our liturgy this month. And there are other parts of the year where we chant the Heart Sutra in English as our liturgy. So this is something that we encounter often, but we don't always talk about it. We can think of the Heart Sutra. We can think of the Heart Sutra, especially as one of the Prajnaparamita texts, the perfection of wisdom teachings. This is a group of texts of literature that make up a large collection of Buddhist teachings, but they tend to look at they tend to take the perfection of wisdom as their topic, as their theme. And we differentiate wisdom from knowledge. So knowledge being things that we know, such as facts or memories. And here we're talking about wisdom, which is something a little more intuitive. It's something that arises from practice, arises from encountering experience, not just a fact held in the mind. And so we can think of the Heart Sutra being part of this collection of wisdom literature as embodying or containing the heart or the core or the essence of these Prajnaparamita teachings. And oftentimes we can think of Prajnaparamita, perfection of wisdom. Oftentimes the perfection of wisdom is said to be the mother of Buddhas, that which gives birth to Buddhas, that which Buddhas arise from, is perfection of wisdom. And sometimes Prajnaparamita is talked about almost as a female deity, talked about in the feminine as this ideal energy or view that we can turn towards. And another part of the Heart Sutra that I want to touch on is the Dharani at the end, the Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. We'll get to that at the end. So the Heart Sutra was thought to be composed early in Mahayana history. It's one of the sutras that is very firmly one of the sutras that sort of is claimed by the Mahayana as one of their definitive sutras. And the earliest translation that we know of is from China from about 200 to 250 CE. So it's fairly old. And it was probably composed in southern India and then spread along trade routes. And the oldest copy we have is from 3rd century China, but it probably existed before that. And it's one of the rare sutras that had most likely been translated into many languages, many cultures, and then at times back translated into Sanskrit. So scholars who compare different texts and different versions of texts have made this comment that it had actually been back translated into Sanskrit. A little peculiar. So I want to look at this text very briefly and then point out a few things. So with the English translation that we tend to read, I'm not going to focus on the Sino-Japanese tonight, but on the English translation, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practicing Prajnaparamita. This is the Bodhisattva of compassion who is deep in samadhi, deep in trance, deep in meditative practice. Clearly saw that all 5 aggregates are empty. And this clear is important. There's no obstructions here in the mind. There's There's nothing in the way of that view. Clearly saw that all five aggregates, form, sensation, perception, formation, consciousness, are empty and thus relieved all suffering. And empty here is empty of permanent intrinsic existence. And Avalokiteshvara is addressing Shariputra, who was the Buddha's disciple, considered foremost in wisdom. But this was a sort of having an older view of wisdom, perhaps. This was the older versions of Buddhism that were in existence as the Mahayana teachings were arising. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness, and emptiness does not differ from form. This is one of the key points in the sutra. Form itself is emptiness, and emptiness is itself form. It's equating this sense of form with this emptiness, this impermanence, this changeableness. And then it goes on to say sensations, perceptions, formations, and consciousness are also like this. So sensations themselves are emptiness, emptiness themselves sensations. Perceptions are emptiness, and emptiness are perceptions, and formations and consciousness. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. And here dharmas is this small d dharmas. It's all things, all conditioned things are marked by emptiness. They neither arise nor cease, or are neither defiled nor pure, neither increase nor decrease. All these things marked by emptiness are things that we recognize with the mind, that we label with the mind, that we see incorrectly with the mind. Therefore, given emptiness, there is no form, sensation, perception, formation, consciousness. There's nothing that we can find that falls into those categories. Nothing that we can find that is individual existent, that does not rely on other things. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind. No realm of sight down to no realm of mind consciousness. This is going through several of the lists in Buddhism, things that are often put forward as components of a self. And then the sutra is then saying, nope, not that. Oh, wait, not that either. Nope, not that one. Oh, you think so? Nope, not that one. And then we get down to another set of lists. There's neither ignorance nor extinction of ignorance, down to neither old age and death nor extinction of old age and death. Those are marking the 12-fold chain of causation, which in Buddhism is one of the main teachings around how a birth of a self occurs. No suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path. Those are the Four Noble Truths. No knowledge and no attainment. Isn't that what we're after? Perhaps, perhaps not. There's nothing to attain, there's nothing to gain, there's nothing to get. And with nothing to attain, or acquire, or get, or have, the Bodhisattva relies on prajna paramita, this perfection of wisdom. And thus the mind is without hindrance, just like Avalokiteshvara, seeing clearly. And without hindrance, there is no fear. What is there to fear? Who is there to experience that fear? And far beyond all inverted views or deluded views, one realizes nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future rely on prajna paramita, are born from prajna paramita, and thereby attain unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. And this attainment is not an attainment that is sought after or something to gain, but something that arises naturally. unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore, know the Prajnaparamita, this perfection of wisdom, as a great miraculous mantra, a great bright mantra, supreme mantra, incomparable mantra, which removes all suffering and is true, not false. Therefore, we proclaim the Prajnaparamita mantra, this great perfection of wisdom mantra, the mantra that says Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisvaha. And I've heard that translated or approximately translated several different ways. One of them is simply gone, gone, gone beyond, gone further beyond, into enlightenment, hurrah, some such thing. There's different versions of that, but basically it's that injunction to go beyond whatever it is we think we have, we see, we encounter, to look further, look deeper, look past, to let go of, to continue on. There's no place to rest, keep going. So that's sort of that's the translation that we tend to use when we chant it in English. And the sutra takes that, it uses this method of an apophatic view, a deconstructive view, to take everything that we think we can rely on, everything we lean on for practice, for our life, for our encounters with reality, for our understanding of ourselves, and deconstruct it with that it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Even the teachings of Buddhism are deconstructed. Even the sutra itself is deconstructed. Emptiness itself is seen as empty. And we can look at this from a philosophical or an intellectual point of view. I just finished up a class series at Dharma Rain on these wisdom teachings, so they're somewhat fresh in my mind. And we looked at these teachings from a practice view, but also a little bit from a philosophical view. We didn't get deep into the philosophy of emptiness. But most of the time, at least initially, we work with this material with our intellect, with our mind. We try to understand it. What does this mean? And we keep getting shown again and again in both the Heart Sutra and also the larger Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the Diamond Sutra, the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines, the Perfection of Wisdom in 100,000 lines. That things and events and ideas and abstractions are empty of any inherent permanent existence. And that mind uses language and concepts to label objects, even objects of mind, even mind itself. When everything is negated, when everything is seen as empty, what then? We can lean deeply into this practice of not this, not this, not this. But then what? And experience says that things may be empty from an absolute view, but we're still here, right? We're still here, and we still encounter things from a conventional view or a relative view or provisional view. We still need to live and to function in whatever environment in which we find ourselves in. So we can look at this from a practice view as well as an intellectual view. But what does that look like? What might that look like? We can certainly keep it in mind as we do our zazen, perhaps holding a phrase or a sentence or an idea. And I think the sutra itself describes meditational experience, or rather experiential understanding. As we practice, as we sit in meditation, we can look at elements of our life or ourself and recognize their unsatisfactoriness, their impermanence, their lack of self. And each thing can be seen as illusory or dreamlike, constructed and labeled by our deluded mind, the mind that's functioning from a state of ignorance. And this ignorance is ignorance of the true reality of things. And Dogen, in his work Shobogenzo, the second fascicle in the Shobogenzo is called Makahanya Haramitsu. This is the great perfection of wisdom. So he's writing on the manifestation of, Kaz translates that as the manifestation of great prajna, of great wisdom. So I want to read to you a little bit of Dogen's fascicle. He actually goes through and transcribes the sutra itself at the beginning of this fascicle, and then comments on it. And this is what Dogen writes. In the assembly of Shakyamuni Buddha, there was a monk who said to himself, I will take refuge in this very profound manifestation of prajna. Although nothing arises or perishes in the midst of this manifestation of prajna, the precept skandha, the samadhi skandha, the wisdom skandha, the emancipation skandha, and the emancipation of views skandha are established. The fruits of entering the stream, of once returning, no longer returning, and of the arhat are established. The Pratyeka Buddha's enlightenment is established. The unsurpassable complete enlightenment is established. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha treasures are established. The turning of the wondrous Dharma wheel and awakening sentient beings are established. And the Buddha read the monk's mind and said to him, that's right, that's right. The very profound manifestation of prajna is subtle and fathomless. This monk's understanding was that taking refuge in all things is taking refuge in prajna that does not arise or perish. And at the very moment of taking refuge, the prajna that establishes precepts, samadhi, wisdom, and awakening sentient beings is actualized. This prajna is called emptiness, so the actualization of emptiness is established. This is the manifestation of prajna that is extremely subtle and fathomless. And then Dogen goes on to tell a little story. Indra, one of the gods of the heavens of the 33, asked the elder Subhuti, who was one of the Buddha's main disciples, Great Reverend, if bodhisattvas, great beings, want to experience the profound manifestation of prajna, how should they study? This is one of the key things in the perfection of wisdom literature. How should bodhisattvas walk? How should they stand? How should they control their thoughts? If you've studied the Diamond Sutra with Wy'East, then hopefully you remember that or recognize that. And Subhuti said, Lord Indra of Kausaka, if bodhisattvas, great beings, want to experience the profound manifestation of prajna, they should study as they would study empty space. Thus, studying prajna is empty space. Empty space is studying prajna. Then Indra asked the Buddha, World-honored one, if good men and women receive, recite, reflect upon, and explain to others the profound manifestation of the prajna you've explained, how should I protect them? Please teach me. And so this God is asking how to protect those who practice this perfection of wisdom. And Subhuti answered for the Buddha, Lord Indra of Kausaka, do you think there is anything you need to protect? And Indra said, no, Great Reverend, I don't see anything I need to protect. Subhuti said, Lord Indra of Kausaka, if good men and women practice the profound manifestation of the prajna, which the Buddha has explained, that itself is protection. If they do so, they will not stray from it. So you should know that in case humans or non-humans want to find a way to harm good in men and women, it will not be possible. Lord Indra of Kaustaka, protecting the profound manifestation of prajna, which the Buddha has explained, and protecting the bodhisattvas who practice it, are not different from protecting empty space. Thus, know that receiving, reciting, or reflecting upon the profound manifestation of prajna is no other than protecting prajna. Intending to protect is receiving, reciting, and so forth. Dogen continues. Rujing, my late master, old Buddha, said, the entire body is a mouth, hanging in empty space. And it has wind bell in parentheses after mouth, so it's talking about a wind bell. The entire body is a mouth hanging in empty space, regardless of the wind from east, west, south, or north, joining the whole universe in chiming out prajna. Ting ting, ting ting, ting ting. This is an authentic era of Buddha ancestors speaking prajna. The entire body is prajna. The entire other is prajna. The entire self is prajna. The entire east, west, south, and north is prajna. Shakyamuni Buddha said, Shariputra, sentient beings should dedicate themselves and pay respect to this prajna, just as to the living Buddha. They should reflect upon the manifestation of prajna, just as they dedicate themselves and pay respect to the Buddha, the world-honored one. Why so? Because the manifestation of prajna is no other than the Buddha, the world-honored one. The Buddha, the world-honored one, is no other than the manifestation of prajna. The manifestation of prajna is itself the Buddha, the world-honored one. The Buddha, the world-honored one, is the manifestation of prajna. Why so? Shariputra, unsurpassable, complete enlightenment of all the Tathagatas, has emerged from the manifestation of prajna. Shariputra, bodhisattvas, great beings, Pratyeka Buddhas, arhats, never returners, once returners, stream returners, have all emerged from the manifestation of prajna. Shariputra, the 10 ways of wholesome actions in the world, the 4 stages of meditation, the 4 samadhis and formlessness, and the 5 miraculous powers have all emerged from the manifestation of prajna. Thus the Buddha, the world-honored one, is the manifestation of prajna. The manifestation of prajna is all things. All things are aspects of emptiness, not arising beyond arising, not perishing, not defiled, not pure, not increasing, not decreasing. To actualize the manifestation of prajna is to actualize the Buddha, the world-honored one. And Dogen says, look into this, study this. Dedicate yourself and take refuge in the manifestation of prajna is to see and uphold the Buddha, the world-honored one. It is to be the Buddha, the world-honored one, seeing and accepting. So Dogen takes this fascicle and changes some words around and reminds us form is not different from emptiness, and prajna is not different from emptiness. That all of these things are arising out of prajna, out of emptiness, out of wisdom. All of these things that we encounter, including ourselves. So this Heart Sutra is chanted daily or almost daily by Buddhists around the world. It's a staple in the Zen temples in America. And when the priests of the Soto Zen Buddhist Association get together and have our services in the morning, it's often the Heart Sutra in Sino-Japanese that we chant, as our collective English translations vary. But in the Sino-Japanese, we all chant it the same way. And chanting is one way to practice with the sutra, and another way I'll mention is to copy it. or to read, recite, and reflect upon it as the sutra says or the fascicle says. And sutra copying is a body practice way of working with the text. And the way I was taught sutra copying is to put attention on forming the letters one at a time, noticing the tension in the fingers, the bend of the wrist. Really, the way I was taught was to offer incense and then do bows and then engage in sutra copying. And if an error is made, well, start with a fresh page. Start again, copying one letter at a time, just for a set period of time. It doesn't have to be very long, the length of an incense stick. And to copy with that sense of no gaining idea, not trying to make it to the end of a phrase or the end of a paragraph, or to do the whole thing all at once. Just set aside some time and engage with the copying. It can be a beautiful practice of intimately engaging with the text. So this Heart Sutra that speaks to this core part of our practice, this looking into the emptiness of things, of realizing it completely, of embodying it completely. It feels appropriate as we're approaching Rohatsu, as we are leaning into the more intentional forms of practice or times of practice, leaning into that space where we're about to commemorate Shakyamuni's dedication to sitting down and not moving until he understood the causes of suffering. And so all of these things that the Heart Sutra negates, there's also a way in which it affirms. And we can see this as we sit with it, as we hold this sutra in our meditation practice. That yes, each thing is empty, but each thing is beautiful and unique and vibrant in its emptiness. Each thing is unique and also interdependent in its emptiness. And so hidden in that emptiness, that no self place, there's something very beautiful and precious. That's my talk for this evening. Happy to have comments and questions and discussion.
Thank you, Jyoshin. That was really interesting. A lot to think about. And I don't remember exactly what was said, but you talked earlier about deconstruction and related to the philosophy of emptiness. Could you talk about deconstruction a little bit more? I haven't heard that or don't remember.
There's a way in which in Buddhism, when we're looking at the things that we encounter and looking at trying to identify what they are, how we encounter them, how the mind engages with them. One of the methods that can be used is to use this idea of deconstructing a thing to see its emptiness. And so we can take something, like classic examples are a chariot, and I want to be able to have something like to show you, like, here's this thing. I don't have a chariot, but we can imagine a chariot. You can imagine it however you like, however ornate you like. And like we can look at that and imagine, is a chariot without wheels still a chariot? Does it need its wheels to be a chariot? If you take away the axle, is it a chariot? If you take away the floor, would you still call it a chariot? If it was a pile of parts, would it be a chariot? At what point does this pile of parts become a chariot? Is it when all of the parts are assembled? Or is it when it's attached to something that can pull it? Is it a chariot only when it's functioning as a chariot? Hmm. And so a chariot is dependent upon all of its parts. And even those parts, if you look at those little parts, you look at a wheel. At what point is a wheel a wheel? Is it when it has a rim, or when it has spokes, or when it's attached to an axle? And if you look at a spoke, when is a spoke a spoke? Is it only when it's in line or in relationship to other spokes? Is a spoke only a spoke when it's a part of a wheel? So we can take things and we can start trying to break them down into smaller and smaller parts. But each time we find something that's smaller, we can break it down further still, right? And we can break things down until we get to something that we think is the smallest thing. But then we have to hold this question of, is it the smallest thing because it's the smallest thing? Or is it the smallest thing only because that's the limit of our perception? How do we really know what's real? And we can scale upward. What's the biggest thing? Is there something bigger than that? And part of this process, part of this method of deconstructing things to see their emptiness, part of what comes along with that is looking at the way the mind can take a collection of things and put a label on it, or put a label on a concept of it, and consider it a whole, when really it's just a collection of parts. My body is really a collection of cells, some of which are mine and some of which really aren't even mine. The bacteria in my gut, are they mine or not mine? They're part of my body, but they don't have my DNA. That's a little funny. But everything in my body is made of cells or minerals or electricity. And we can say that this is my body, perhaps when all of those things are together and functioning as a body. But they're always changing. The body I have today is not the body I had yesterday. There's different food in my stomach. There's a different energy pattern. There's a different mood or affect that's experienced, not just in terms of emotion, but in terms of where attention is held in this body. So this body today is not yesterday's body. It's a new body. What happened to the old body? I don't remember it dying. I don't remember it disappearing. But change happened. All of a sudden I have this body. So this deconstruction is a method of analyzing what we encounter and sort of poking at it. Is this true? Is this true? And this is something that Buddhism loves to do. Is this true? Zen especially loves to do this. What about this? Oh, wait, I'm looking at that through a diluted view. Oh, wait. I've got some hindrances in my mind that are obscuring my view. I'm not seeing it clearly. I'm thinking of myself as a whole being that is consistent both internally and externally across time. Well, that's a diluted view. And so part of what Buddhism teaches is that our experiences of suffering come from our deluded views. So we can use this process of deconstructing to try to either lean towards clarity or to find those places where we miss the mark. And you know what? I still have to go to the grocery store tomorrow, right? So we still have to interact with this reality. But I can still go to the grocery store with a little more of a sense of freedom, knowing that the self that's going to the grocery store doesn't have to be the previous self that just came from a hospital where people are sick and dying, right? I can just be the person in the grocery store. I don't have to carry the sorrows from previously in the day with me. Those are very coarse examples, but hopefully that helps a little in understanding what I meant by some of that deconstructing.
Yes, thank you very much. Well said. Interesting.
But how does that get to the emptiness?
Because emptiness is still defined as that emptiness of a permanent, unchanging self. It is empty of inherent existence, to use a technical term. So nothing exists in and of itself as its own separate being, as its own separate entity. So one way we can talk about emptiness is seeing the changeableness, but sometimes we don't see the change. There are aspects of Buddhist philosophy that will say that one thing does not change into another because you can't find those definitive edges. And we can get into some murky philosophy. Well, not murky, but challenging philosophy. So emptiness is pointing at the emptiness of inherent existence. Does that help at all? Or do you want more? You're not satisfied.
I think it would be interesting to have a more in-depth philosophical and Buddhist perspective discussion, because deconstruction, in my view, my experience has this negative negative thought. And it's like I'm thinking what I was thinking when you were recently talking is like deconstruction, when you come from the hospital to go to the store, is really just a change, not necessarily a deconstruction. So I'm trying to figure out how change and deconstruction work together. So deconstruction is the change and the elimination of part of that thought process. Anyway, it's very interesting to think about.
So I would say deconstruction is a method of analysis of how reality works or how things truly are. Let's say that way, how things truly are from a Buddhist perspective, let's say. And I would say through using that method or through reflecting on emptiness, at least in my experience, through reflecting on emptiness, it is easier for me to move freely through the world. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I can see that.
And emptiness in Buddhism is not nihilism. It's not nothingness. It is that complete interdependence, perhaps. And it has more to do with how the mind perceives and labels concepts and less to do with objective reality. Let's put it that way. So we're looking really at how the mind works with its sensory input, how the mind projects onto what we see and hear and touch and taste and think about, how we project onto those things qualities that they don't have.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really helpful. It really helped me kind of see a difference in my mind. Not to just build on whatever's already there, really have it be empty or fresh start. You have to get rid of those, how the mind traditionally typically would build on it. That makes, yeah, that's interesting. It makes sense now. You have to deconstruct it so that you can have a clear view.
And that deconstruction, it really is a mental exercise. It's really just sitting and thinking about you know, how things are made up of component parts, how things don't last forever. Although I've been thinking about plastic recently, and I think plastic might be its own state of matter. But like, I look at my phone, right? I've got my phone here on my desk, and I label it phone, and I think it's a thing. I think it's a thing that I can pick up and carry with me and touch and look at or listen to. I don't taste it, but you know, I can engage with it with my senses. But I can also look at my phone and recognize that it's a plastic case and screen, and I can guess that there's some electronics on the inside, probably plastic and metal. And I think this is a thing, and I really, really want it to stay in this shape. I have a key investment in this staying whole. I'm sitting in a loft right now. If I pitch it over the edge, like, it's not going to be whole anymore. That causes me anxiety, right? This is suffering. I want this to be permanent. I have attached some sense of value and meaning making to it. It's not going to be that way. It's not always going to be that way. It could break. I could lose it. I think of this in 500 years, and I hope it's not in this shape. It might be plastic, right? This is what's, I've been thinking about impermanence, and plastic is really starting to bother me. But we do this with most things we encounter. We either want them to be permanent because we're attached to them, or we don't like them and we want them to go away. We do the same with the people in our lives as well. We want them to stay the same if we love them, and we want them to change if we don't like them. But both of those views are false, because things don't ever stay the same. And I could probably keep talking for a long time, and we're at 8:15, and I think I'm just going to say the closing verse, and if people want to go, they can, and if you want to stay, I'm happy to talk a little bit longer. Okay? The universe is the boundless sky, just as the lotus is wetted by the water that surrounds it. The mind is immaculate and beyond the dust. Let us bow to the highest Lord. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, Maha Prajna Paramita. And I said the verse wrong, right? I missed a word. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. Just as the lotus is not wetted by the water that surrounds it. Empty. It's all empty. Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Jyoshin.
And we can stop recording, Lexi.
I would talk with you for a few more minutes if you want. You can.